Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I'm talking to Erin Bury, who is the co-founder and CEO of Willful, which is an online estate planning platform. She's also a columnist for the Globe and Mail, where she writes about parenting and personal finance, amongst other topics. Today, Erin and I are talking about finances, entrepreneurship, and parenting. Welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today. But before we get into all of those topics, can you tell us one thing that you did today to take care of yourself?
Ooh, good question. Well, first, thanks for having me, Hillary. I know we're Insta friends, so it's nice to bring it IRL, at least onto Zoom. One thing I did today, I am a little bit jet lagged from getting back from Greece last week, and I had a little bit too much chicken souvlaki and French fries while away. So I woke up naturally at 5:30 this morning and did a couple Peloton classes, and I love starting the day with a workout. So that was my one thing.
And are you normally up at that time, or is that just because of the time difference?
Usually I have to set an alarm to be up at that time. I'm usually up at between 5:30 and 6 because my children are in the phase where as soon as they're awake, they're very all consuming. And so I usually try to get a workout in the morning just because I find it difficult to fit it in any other time of the day. Am I a morning person? I've become one. And if I didn't have to get up at 5:30, would I? No, but I know for myself, my mental health is so much better when I have time to exercise, and so I prioritize that.
Yeah, it really is amazing how you can train yourself to get up in the morning, even if you're not used to it. And I just love it that quiet time in the morning to do whatever you want, whether it's working out or meditating or reading a book or just having a warm cup of tea. It's just so amazing when you're a parent. Like it's the best.
Yes. And it does require going to bed. People say, okay, you're getting up that early. What time do you go to bed? Well, I'm usually asleep by 9:30. So it's not the coolest choice. Like my husband's definitely more of a night owl. And so he stays up later and we'll do, watch movies and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, this is the phase of life where I'm going to be the grandma who goes to bed at 9 p.m., but it allows me to kind of start my mornings the way that I choose instead of being violently woken up by a 2-year-old screams.
Yeah, exactly. So can you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do? Because you're doing quite a few different things.
Absolutely. So I'm first and foremost a mom of two beautiful girls. I live with my husband and our daughters in Prince Edward County, Ontario, which is absolutely beautiful. And I know we're going to talk about that later. My career has been spent really as kind of a journalist and marketer and entrepreneur. My background is a kind of mix of things, but I would say I'm not a born entrepreneur. I really kind of stumbled into it through osmosis. I was a tech journalist writing about entrepreneurship on a daily basis and interviewing startup founders. And my husband is super entrepreneurial. And so I just kind of fell in love with it and ended up here. And now I define myself as an entrepreneur, but I definitely didn't earlier in my career. And then I also, as a journalism grad who spent time as a journalist, I love writing. And so I write a column for the Globe and Mail about parenting and personal finance every 2 weeks. And then I also love doing kind of charitable stuff. So I'm on the board at Save the Children Canada and involved with some local charities like a literacy organization called County Kids Read here in Prince Edward County. So that's me in a nutshell. And in my free time, I love reading and traveling. As you just heard, was in Greece, but my husband and I have been to 6 continents and hoping to get to Antarctica sometime soon. Maybe not with young children, but at some point.
Wow. Yeah, you're busy doing all sorts of different things. So, can you tell us a bit more about this journey into entrepreneurship? Because I think there are so many people that are wanting to go in that direction or think about it, but they don't come from a background of being around entrepreneurs. And it sounds like that is your experience as well.
Absolutely. I think there's two ways to become an entrepreneur. You're either someone like my husband, who I define as a born entrepreneur, the type of person that was hustling and doing lemonade stands and garage sales and launching businesses in the schoolyard from a very young age, and who kind of have it baked into their DNA. And then I think there are people like me who were not that. I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial household. My dad was a journalist. My mom and my stepdad both worked at Nortel, big corporation. And I didn't have any sort of entrepreneurship in my family and my life and my surroundings, and was raised at a time in the 90s where it wasn't also sexy or publicized to be an entrepreneur. Of course, there have always been entrepreneurs and small business owners, but it really only became this kind of lucrative or desirable or even viable path, I think, in the 2000s, with the rise of social media and entrepreneurs like Sarah Blakely from Spanx, who kind of put it into the public lexicon. Before that, your parents really wanted you to graduate university and go work at some big company. And if you said, I wanted to start a business, they probably would have been disappointed. So my path to entrepreneurship was very much through exposure. I worked after graduating from university in 2007, I worked at a PR agency and met an amazing woman entrepreneur, who became my boss, Sarah Prevette. And she said, I'm hiring someone to be the second employee at this tech startup that I'm building, and I think you'd be perfect for it. And I was kind of like looking around like, me? I'm just, a cog in a machine over here. I'm going to go climb the corporate ladder like my mom. And that sounds good to me. And I had a lot of trepidation about kind of stepping off this expected path of, get a job on the bottom rung of a larger company and work your way up to that corner office. But my mom said to me at that time, what's the worst that happens? You go there, it doesn't work out, go get another job. You're smart. And I'm grateful to her for pushing me to take a risk. And that was kind of, if you think about that movie Sliding Doors, like what was the TSN turning point? What was that moment that really changed your life? For me, it was taking that job to be the second employee at a startup, because that then put me on a path to interacting. It was a social network for entrepreneurs. So my entire job was going to events, meeting entrepreneurs, interviewing them, whether it was a local entrepreneur in Toronto, all the way up to Mark Cuban and famous sharks from Shark Tank that I had a chance to interview. So that really just exposed me to this entrepreneurial DNA. And so when the time came, which I know we'll get into, around my husband having the idea for Willful, it was just kind of that much easier to say yes. And I still am not that ideas person. My husband wakes up, I swear to God, every week with a new business idea. I'm like, you already have a business. Can we just focus here? But he can't help himself, because he's not alone. I've seen so many other people in my life that are just these consummate born entrepreneurs. They can't help but have business ideas everywhere they turn. I am not that, but I don't think you need to be that to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be the person with the idea. You can be the person to bring the idea to life.
I think a lot of the time we need those people like you that help bring the idea to life, because ideas are great, but we can just have so many of them, some of us, and that's interesting, but it doesn't come to anything unless we have the people who are helping us to actually bring it to fruition.
Absolutely. And, I was telling you before we hit record that I consider myself a very type A organized person. And my husband is the opposite. He's very much the ideas, the in the clouds, the dreamer, maybe not as type A. And so putting those two things together can actually be really great, because you have that person that's always going to be thinking of what's next and innovation in the future. And then you have the person that, as you said, can kind of take it and say, okay, how do we actually put this into something that's feasible and can become a company today? And if you only have one or the other, you might actually not be able to get it off the ground.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you have for somebody listening who would like to dip their toe into entrepreneurism, or maybe wants to go full into it but is scared?
I mean, the first time I started a company was in my 20s, and I interviewed so many startup founders who were 20, 22, 24. And I will say, the younger you are, the easier it is to take that risk. So if you're listening and you're anywhere in your 20s and you do not have children or mortgages or things that are holding you back, either financially or personally, then why wouldn't you, right? There's no barrier to entry. There's very little, again, like my mom said to me, if it doesn't work out, unless you're, putting a second mortgage on your parents' house or borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars from the bank in 2025, it's very easy to start a business with very little capital, depending on the type of business it is. But if you want to build software, if you want to set up a Shopify store or, create a prototype of an item, it's so much easier to do that today with very little capital versus 10, 20 years ago. And it's also feasible to do something as a side hustle while you are working a full-time job to pay the bills, to validate that idea before you dive in. So my recommendation would be do it as early as you can when you have fewer things tying you down. But if you're like me and you're 40 and you have a mortgage and you have kids and you have bills to pay and you can't just, walk away completely, then I think the best advice I have is validate your idea, and don't just validate your idea with your friends and family because they're all going to tell you that it's the best idea since sliced bread. You need to find the actual target customers who would be putting down their credit card to pay for this thing. And you need to do research with them, call 100 of them, run a Facebook ad targeting them and have them fill out a survey and pay them $5 each to do so. Like, just find any sort of market validation that you can, that the problem that you're solving goes beyond you. And more importantly, that people are actually willing to pay for it, because there are a lot of great ideas out there, but they're super niche. And they're also things that are nice to have that people aren't actually willing to pay for. And it's better you find that out now versus sinking tens of thousands of dollars into an idea and finding it out later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know your kids are still young, but what are you doing with them, or like how are you showing them that entrepreneurial spirit and building those skills in them? Are you doing that or not so much?
We're just trying to survive over here, Hillary. We are not doing that yet. I think about this a lot, both with finances and with entrepreneurship. How do I talk about money with my kids at a young age? How do I instill some of these money management skills, or just teach them about some of these concepts that we don't learn about in school and we don't always talk about at the dinner table? And so for me, a lot of it comes down to modeling, right? When I think about my own path, the reason I wanted to have a big job and that I was very ambitious is because my mom was the breadwinner. She had this amazing career. She got to travel. She worked on TV commercials. She did all this really cool stuff during her tenure at Nortel. She still has her own PR consultancy, and she just released a book last year. I mean, she's an amazingly incredible person, but she definitely modeled that for me. And so I think about that with our girls, and I think about modeling the fact that entrepreneurship is a viable career path, that it is something that anybody can try, and that you don't have to go down this kind of corporate path if you don't want to. Although if they want to pursue that, I'll be supportive. So my goal as they grow up is to make sure they know there's not one way to be successful. I was a straight A student in school. My husband was not. He absolutely did not get the best grades, and he really felt like he wasn't going to be successful in life because he wasn't this, straight A book smart person. But he's extremely resourceful and creative and has turned all of those skills into a successful entrepreneurial career. And so I think that's also what I want to model for our kids, is that even if you're not the person who gets straight A's on your report card, there's still so many amazing skills that you possess that you can put into entrepreneurship that will actually be a secret weapon for you instead of a hindrance.
And how do you balance having willful and doing all the things you're doing and being a mom to two young girls? It's a lot being just being a mother, right? I shouldn't say just, but it's full on. And I know when my kids were that age, it took like all my energy just to be there for them, to let alone be a CEO of a company. How do you do all of the things?
Honestly, this is my biggest struggle. I think I could easily just say, oh, we make it work and here's how. But the reality is, it's a real struggle. When you start out in entrepreneurship, you hear a lot of these stereotypes around what investors are looking for. They don't want to invest in people with families. They want to invest in second-time founders, not first-time founders. And honestly, I now understand why. Because as a first-time founder, you make a lot of mistakes. You don't know what you don't know. And so investors investing in someone who's already started a company means that it's a cheat code. They can skip all of those lessons. They already know them. That's logical. And entrepreneurs with families have a lot of constraints, right? My biggest constraint is time. When I didn't have kids, I could wake up and work from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed. Not saying I did, but I could have if I chose to. And now I have a lot of constraints because my kids are in the phase where they don't play nicely together on their own, and you cannot leave them alone in a room for 10 minutes. And so my answer is it's a work in progress. And what parenthood has and running a business at the same time have really taught me is time management and how to kind of boil down to the things that need to take priority. Prioritization, like if I only have between the hours of 8:30 to 5 to work, then I better be working on the highest impact things. And I better use my time wisely, and I better not leave that thing for later tonight because I'm going to be exhausted when my kids get into bed at 8. And as you already heard, I go to bed at 9:30. So there's not a lot of window there to actually be doing work. So I'm always looking for tips on this, but I think for me, it's supportive spouse. My husband isn't as 9 to 5 as I am as the co-founder. He works on a lot of strategic and special projects, but he has more capacity to do the grocery shopping and to be with the kid if they're sick at home. So that's been really helpful. And being super anal and regimented about my day. There's a reason I get up at 5:30 a.m. to work out, and that I'm like very regimented about my days, because I know if I want to be a great CEO, but still be present for my kids, I have to manage my time really effectively and be very intentional about how I'm spending that time.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And there is no magic, is there? There's
No,
nobody out there that has it all figured out. But
no.
being regimented, having those routines, getting up early, knowing your priorities, all these things that you said, I think no matter what we're doing in our lives, that can be so helpful and that can change so much about our productivity and our presence with our kids, can't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, listen, I'm not perfect. Like, there's absolutely moments where I should be present with my kids and I'm checking Slack. And there's, moments where there's my husband's away and I have the sick kid and I'm juggling that with Zoom meetings. And so I think the imperfection is, if you expect perfection, you're going to be let down. Right. And I remember Randy Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg's sister, saying this thing about, pick three. You can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. So, kids, family, work, sleep, fitness, hobbies, pick three of those. So that's what you can focus on at any given time. And I think about my life, and I do prioritize sleep, fitness, family, and work. And so there are things that, I don't read as many books as I would love to. I don't have as much leisure time as I would want, but I know that this is also a phase, right? When I see people at the park or at the mall, they always say, oh my gosh, you're really in it. You're really in it. Your kids are like in that phase where they need you all the time. And it won't always be like that. But then I also think, how lucky am I that I'm in that phase where my kids need me this much and that I am their favorite person. And when I get home from a week in Greece, they're the happiest to see me. In 10 years, they may not be, right? They're going to be with their friends, and I'm going to have way more time to work and way more time to read, but I might be lamenting that I'm not their favorite person in the world, right? So I think part of what I try to do is to take myself out of my day-to-day, which can be very overwhelming and exhausting, and to say, how lucky are you that you have two beautiful girls, that you have autonomy with your company to be able to do school drop off if you want, or to adjust your hours, and to be in this phase that some parents 20 years ahead of me would kind of kill to go back to, even if it's just for a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it
Yeah.
helps. Sometimes I'm still like, nope, I'm still exhausted.
I think you can have the gratitude and be exhausted. I don't
Yeah.
think you have to have one or the other. And I think that's real life, isn't it? We can
Yeah.
savor those moments. We can be so grateful for them. And sometimes life can be too full at moments.
And I think I've tried to be very open and vulnerable about this experience of building a business while building a family, because when I was coming up in my career, there were not entrepreneurs, not women, not men, talking about that experience, because it was seen as very detrimental, right? Well, an investor is not going to invest in me if I talk about the fact that I have to pick up my kids from daycare by 5 and I can't sit working until midnight. And it's very different now. And I kind of really want to be that example for people that, like, you absolutely can do these things. It's hard. I'm going to be honest with you about the constraints of being a parent of young kids and building your own business. But if I can model that, if I can talk about the challenges and help you go in a little bit eyes open, and also just normalize the fact that millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners have families. We've all been doing this for decades. It's just we haven't been talking about it. Maybe I can make it a bit more normalized for the person at Willful who wants to tell us that she's expecting, or another entrepreneur who's like, I don't know, can I really start a business while I'm pregnant? And I have role models like Joanna Griffiths from Nix, who raised a monster round of funding when she was 8 months pregnant with twins. And so there are a lot of people I admire who have also opened up that conversation and made it a lot more normal. And I appreciate the people that say, just like me, it's messy. It's not perfect. There are definitely days where I just burst into tears because I'm like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed by toddler birthday parties and the mental to-do list and all of these things on top of my work to-do list, but I still wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you speaking about this. And I wonder if it's something that people are talking about more because if we go back a few generations, it was mainly men in those roles and women were the homemakers. So men didn't ever get asked about their family because the wife was taking care of it. But that's shifting, that we are really sharing roles very differently now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Like I grew up in a house where my mom did have the bigger job, and so my stepdad did all the cooking, which was great because I love you, mom, if you're listening. But cooking was maybe not your most amazing skill. And actually, one time she asked me, "What's your favorite thing that mommy makes?" And I said, "Money." So that's yeah, that should encapsulate it there. Uh, but I think that again, it goes back to that modeling, right? It was modeled in my own household that you can have a spouse who does a lot of the domestic stuff and picks the kids up at school. And that's great. It doesn't have to be this traditional 1950s version of the housewife who has the piping hot dinner. And I'm very lucky again that not only do I run Willful with my spouse and he's supportive of me in the chief executive role, but he's also someone who is super involved. Like I went to Greece for a week and I have friends who had to list out, okay, which kid is in which extracurricular and all of the details about the week because their husband might work in an office and he's not even able to kind of take the kids. I don't have to do that with my husband because we're both at home. He's as involved with the kids' schedule as I am and is amazing with wanting to be involved in their life and take on a lot of that domestic stuff. And so yeah, I feel lucky that I have help. Would I love to have a Mrs. Doubtfire who did like my laundry and my cleaning and meal prep and all of the things that truly are the bane of my existence? Yes, but you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah, I just watched that movie for the first time in probably 20 years with my kids last on the weekend, actually,
Oh,
and
it's so good.
it's so good. Yeah.
So good. And I think we all, I did not grow up in a house where we had any external help like that. And so, I have friends who have invested in housekeepers or nannies. And, they've said, we're not doing the trip to Greece. We're not doing the home renos. We're investing in this person who is freeing up our time to be more present with our children. And my husband and I have talked about it a lot. Like, is this something that we want to do? And we've kind of landed on, no, we're good right now. But all of the friends who have invested in that said the freedom is in time, right? Time is the one resource that we can't pay money to get more of, or we can never get more of. And so, how do we as parents give ourselves back the gift of time, whether that's time to be present with our kids, time to read or go to the spa or do whatever we want, or just time to choose how to spend it instead of constantly running the rat race of the household management. So, which is really a full-time job. Like, I would be a terrible 1950s housewife, but man, do I have a lot of respect for the job of running a household and parenting.
Yeah, it really is a full-time job, but people are often doing it on top of other full-time jobs like
Absolutely.
parenting and their careers.
And we also, my husband is so supportive and so helpful, but I do talk to him quite honestly about the mental and invisible load that women carry, even in a supportive partnership. And it's not always his fault, right? I'm the default person that gets the messages from the daycare provider. I'm the one that's receiving the toddler birthday party invites. I'm the one that's managing the social calendar. As you heard earlier, I'm also very type A. And so part of this is maybe I'm not letting things go, or so I think women in general, unfortunately, I still think bear the burden of a lot of that invisible load, even when they have supportive partners, even though it's 2025. And some of that is self-inflicted by people like me who want to own it because who could do it better than us, right? My husband might mess it up. He might put the wrong snack in the lunch. But partly, I think it's just the society is still wired to be for the moms are the default. And so I struggle with that. Like, how do I actually let go and delegate and elevate to my husband or to our other family members? How do I deprioritize, just not care about things like, what lunch is today? And then how do we also kind of train, whether it's the daycare providers, the schools, the whoever else, that like, hey, there's actually two parents here, and the mom doesn't always have to be the default one they reach out to.
I think it's doing all of those things that you just mentioned. And something that I do with my husband, not with everything, but we try to do with some of like the chores and just tasks that we have and that I work with clients with, is instead of like delegating and saying like, hey, can you take out the garbage? It's just that's one of our roles and we just know it. And some weeks it gets done and some weeks it doesn't. And it might not be done the way that the other person wants, but we have to let go of that attachment to it being done the way that we want it done. Maybe the lunch is sent and the water bottle is forgotten. As the person not doing that job, you just have to let go of that and let the other spouse just do whatever it is that they are going to do for that job. So, yeah, like for instance, with the garbage, it didn't go out this week, you know? Okay, well, that's fine. It can go out next week.
Yeah.
So that can be helpful, I find. And then you're not having to nag, even though you want to in situations. But I think that can help to just like divide those jobs rather than delegate.
Yeah, divide and conquer. I love that.
Yeah.
And you probably have way more tips than I can even be offering, because I'm really the one going through this and learning it. Your kids are a bit older, and obviously, this is what you do, is helping people with this. So, but I always appreciate the idea of, like, again, progress, not perfection, and trying to be kind to yourself, right? Like, I think back to my mom, and she traveled a lot for work, and she was always screaming in late to the dinner table in an era where we had to commute to offices. Like, I commute 10 steps to see my kids after work. And she was an amazing mom, and we're so close, and I never felt that she wasn't there for me or didn't love me or didn't prioritize me. And so I always try to remind myself of that as well, which is, you can model being a busy entrepreneur or career person who cares about your work, and you can also be an amazing parent. My kids know that they're loved and that they're safe and that they're wanted, and that, I think, is the most important thing. And I can tell you, will never doubt that. So again, we're our own worst critics. I think I certainly am. You should be more present with your kid and look at your phone less. You should be doing crafts instead of just like letting them scoot around on the street outside, and the reality is, we can beat ourselves up about a million things as both entrepreneurs and parents, and isn't productive. So I kind of try to like quell that voice and just say, like, you're doing a great job. We're all doing as best as we can. We're doing great jobs.
Yeah, and all we have to be is good enough parents. We don't have to attain that perfection status, which is totally impossible, like you mentioned as well. So we just need to be good enough and our kids to know that they're loved, and
Yeah.
that's enough. We can let them scoot outside and that's okay, right? We don't have to do all the stuff that we see on Instagram or on Pinterest. But if we can shift a little bit and talk a bit about financial health,
Mhm.
I'm wondering, like, what are you doing and what do you recommend to mothers that are listening to help to set their kids up to thrive financially? Where do we even start with this?
It's a great question. I mean, I think for me, I've always been a little bit of a personal finance nerd. My mom made me read The Wealthy Barber back in the day, and it really kind of kicked off this lifelong interest in personal finance. And I think the main takeaway I have looking back at my own childhood and learning about money is, this is not something that you get exposed to in school. And unless your parents are proactively subjecting you to it, or you take a personal interest in it, it's really easy to be ignorant, willfully ignorant about these things, about what a mortgage is, about RESPs, about retirement savings. And so to me, knowledge is power when it comes to personal finance. And that's really my goal for myself, about how to save for my kids, but also as my kids get old enough. And there's a great author named Robin Taub. She wrote a book called The Wisest Investment, and it's all about teaching your kids about money. I actually haven't read it yet. It's on my bookshelf. And when my kids get old enough to start talking to them about it, I'm going to read that and follow some of her tips. So my tips are not really about how to talk to your kids about money, because I haven't done that yet, but I have a philosophy, which is just talk about it as much as I can, give them practical examples like running the lemonade stand, where I can talk to them about a profit and loss statement, and, teach them about some of those cornerstones of either running a business or running a household. For me, with our kids, in terms of my own approach to finances, it's really been about starting with the future goal and working backwards, right? I think for my husband and I, we really want to be able to achieve some key goals for our kids. We want to be able to pay for their schooling if they choose to pursue post-secondary education. We want to be able to give them some sort of lump sum that they could use for a down payment on a house, or to start a business, or to travel the world, like whatever, but something that kind of gives them a leg up in their early 20s. And so when we kind of work backwards, then it's okay, well, what's the best way to do that? Obviously, an RESP is a really great way to save for education. But outside of that, I've been writing some of my recent Globe columns about what the alternatives are, because you can't open a savings account for your kid when they're 5 years old. You have to open it in your name, which can use your contribution room for things like your TFSA. So I'm in the middle of figuring out that strategy. But for me, it's included RESPs, it's included separate savings accounts for kind of non-education savings. And then we've also taken out whole life insurance policies on our kids. I'm a big, again, with Willful, I think a lot about mortality and about planning for things. And so whole life insurance on our kids is a way to, obviously, if something happened, to know that we have a bit of a financial cushion to deal with it, but also it becomes like a long-term savings vehicle for the kids, and turns into guaranteed life insurance for them later, which is great if they ever have any medical issues. So those are kind of the core tenets of our strategy, but a lot of it is just education. I did a ton of research, whether it's ChatGPT or writing posts for the Willful blog about like, okay, I'm a first-time parent. What do I need to know? Apply for the Canada Child Benefit, get your child a SIN number so you can get an RESP, make sure you're getting that RESP. It's free government money, and then kind of going from there beyond the basics.
Yeah, those sound like really good steps to take. And I think they maybe seem basic, but I think there's a lot of parents not putting those in place.
For sure. I mean, when we do research around for Willful, we often ask parents about, hey, do you have an RESP? Do you have life insurance on yourself? Never mind your kids. And a big proportion of people, the answer is no. And if you actually dig into why, of course, there are folks that might say, well, I don't have the capacity to be able to put savings into an RESP, or I can't afford life insurance premiums, or, maybe there's a whole host of other reasons. But I think a lot of it goes back to not knowing, right? Not knowing what a registered education savings plan is, and that the government matches $7,000 of your own savings for free. Not knowing that you can register for the Canada Child Benefit and get free money every month. So again, I think my goal is always empowering myself, reading personal finance blogs, reading publications like the Globe and Mail, and learning about these things. And also doing exactly what you're doing, listening to podcasts, interviewing people, talking to my friends. What are you guys doing? How are you saving for your kids' futures? Even if it's only $25 a month, right? It doesn't have to be huge.
And how does willfully come into this? How does that planning for the unexpected, God forbid that happens? Like, how does that come into planning for our kids' future with their finances?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're in the middle of the largest wealth transfer in history, right? I was just reading an article this morning about the number of people who are trying to do things like buy a home, and it's only becoming possible with either gifts from parents or inheritances from family members. And so when I think about the legacy I want to leave for our kids, of course, we want to do things while we're still alive. We want to, save for their education or give them a lump sum or things like that. But I also want to leave this really positive legacy when we pass away. I hope that we pass on a nest egg, whether it's real estate or whether it's money or investments. And so part of that is thinking about estate planning, right? Ensuring that we have a will that really clearly highlights how those assets would pass and to whom and when. Having life insurance policies that mean that if I were to pass away tomorrow, not only would my husband have that financial cushion to take time off to pay off the mortgage. But if both of us were to pass away, that would go directly to the kids to support them. And then, as I mentioned, having life insurance policies on them as well, because I truly think the last thing a parent wants to sit around and think about is what happens if both of us pass away. But that's kind of what Willful forces you to contemplate, right? If you have young kids and you're creating a will, one of the biggest components of that is appointing a guardian for their care in case something happens to you and the other parent. It is by far the most uncomfortable question to think about, but it's also one of the most empowering decisions to make, because once you decide, okay, my sister would be the guardian if anything happened, and I have this document that outlines it, and I know how the assets would flow to them, and I have life insurance that would provide for them financially so they would have flexibility. There's this real sense of kind of peace of mind and accomplishment that comes from it. And so, there's saving dollars and cents for your kids' future. And then there's putting in place the structures and the policies and the legal documents that will ensure that that lifetime of savings gets passed on effectively and efficiently if something happens.
Yeah, that's a really important thing for us to do. How often do people have to go back and change things once they do this?
Well, right now, I think it's a very set it and forget it thing. You put your will and your, obviously life insurance, you get a renewal statement once a year saying like, great, you're still paying for it. Cool. With a will, typically it's set it and forget it. And so now we're trying to really change that behavior to be review it every year, right? You may not have to make updates, but you should be reviewing it to say, okay, if I got a divorce, do I really want my ex to be the executor of my estate or to leave assets to them? If I've had another child, do I want to add them into the will? Are there any, folks that have passed away that I've named in key roles that I should be removing? So you might only update your will once every 5-7 years, but reviewing it every year and just making sure it reflects your wishes takes 5 minutes and can be a really great activity.
And how long does it generally take for people, if they're doing their wills through Willfully, to do the will initially? Like, is it
Yeah.
a day? Is it a month? What is the process like for people typically?
Yeah, I feel like it seems like this impossible task. Like, people always say, well, I don't have hours and I don't have millions of dollars and I don't want to get all my paperwork out. I'm like, your will is very simple. It can take 20 minutes. If you use Willful, 15-20 minutes. You have to know the answers to some key questions. You have to know who you want to appoint as your executor to wrap up your estate. You have to know who you want to get your assets, and you have to know who you would appoint as the guardian for any minor children or pets. Most of our customers, about 70% of them, are parents with young children. And so, if you're like me, you probably have a pretty common choice. If you're married, I'm going to appoint my spouse as my executor. I'm going to give everything to my spouse. And if we both pass away, everything would go to our kids. And for a guardian, it can vary, but for me, it would be my sister and her husband. Maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's a parent, depending on their age. But these decisions are pretty standard for folks that have young kids. And so if you do know those choices, it really only takes you 15 minutes to actually go through, click the buttons, make the choices, and get the document. And then you do have to, in all provinces except BC, print it out as a physical paper document and sign and witness it. But that, if you're getting together with friends for dinner, you can be the really fun friend that brings your will to sign. We have absolutely done that before. And again, it's that sense of like 15 minutes. When we ask parents about like, what's the emotion that you associate with not having your will done, with not having power of attorney documents or any of these other kind of like big emergency plans done, the word is always anxious. I feel anxious. I feel like I haven't done this important thing. And so we always say, like, we're not selling legal documents, we're selling peace of mind. And then if you knew that it only took 15 minutes, you would probably prioritize it earlier. But it's really traditionally been this like big, expensive, time-consuming thing, visiting lawyers' offices, having multiple meetings. And so that's really what we've tried to do with Willful, is say, what if we just took the approach of online tax software where we guide you through the process, we demystify it, we make it stupid simple, and we make it take 15 minutes and cost a fraction of what it usually does. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 8 years.
You should do that with all the things that, like, you should take note of what are all the things that people have on their to-do list that they never get through and just
100%.
simplify it like that.
Well,
Because, yeah.
I just met a founder who has a company called Jointly, and they're doing this for separation agreements, cohabitation agreements, prenups with Taylor Swift getting married. That's big on everyone's mind right now. But it is that idea of, how can we simplify any legal document using technology? How can we, and that's honestly the great thing about entrepreneurship is that when these born entrepreneurs like my husband encounter these annoyances in our daily life, right? Like, oh, I have to pay this much for that. Like, that's so annoying. There's got to be a better way. And then these people go out and start businesses that solve that for us. And I love that because, again, I'm not the ideas person, but I will happily use the website or the product that makes it a fraction of the cost and way faster. So who knows? I know back in the day when we started the company, we also bought divorceful.com, prenupful, because it was that idea of how could we actually simplify all of these other things. But we really just, it sounds silly to say we fell in love with estate planning, but I think we fell in love with the mission. When a customer buys Willful, we feel like we've genuinely helped them. When people come to work at Willful, they say, it's because I feel like I'm actually making a difference and doing something meaningful in the world instead of selling toilet paper. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And so we're very firmly focused on estate planning now, but there's a million other processes that I hope some other entrepreneur improves.
Yeah, and the way that you say it, that you're helping people with like do you say their state of mind, and it's bringing down their anxiety because we do avoid things that we build up to be so big, and then they become really anxiety provoking, and we layer on like the worry of, oh, but I haven't done that, and all the other stuff with that. So it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think wills are one of those things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It just
so
grows.
nice.
It's kind of like the boulder that gets, the snowball that gets bigger as it goes down the hill.
Yeah.
I love this TikTok influencer. I can't remember her name, but her whole shtick is how long does it take? So she'll take like her junk drawer or her disorganized pantry, and she'll make a video saying like, I've been putting this off for 2 years. And how long will it actually take? And then she, presses record and it speeds up and watches her go around and do it. And at the end of the video, it's like, this thing I've been putting off for 7 years took me 26 minutes. And it's that idea of like, we build these things up. We all do it. We all have that one closet that we haven't organized or that thing that's been lingering on our to-do list. I do it too. I'm not perfect. I'm not the queen of no procrastination. Maybe for you, that's getting a will done. Maybe for me, it's, organizing that one closet. But the reality of it is it never takes as long as you think it's going to. It's never as painful as you think it's going to be. It's just getting to the point where you're like, okay, today's the day. And that's really what we try to do at Willful is like, how can we be your accountability buddy? You've come to our website, you've signed up for an account, you're partway through your will. I know you don't have one. I know you still need one. I know it's still on the list. So my smiling face is going to show up in your inbox and say, okay, how can I help you get it done? Is it a discount that's going to get you over the finish line? Is it education about guardianship or something else related to your will? But that's really the goal is like, how can we not only make this easier, how can we inspire action?
Yeah, and once you take that action, whether it's cleaning out that drawer or the closet or doing your will, you feel amazing after
Yes,
because you built it up to
always.
be so big and you're like, oh my God, I did the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like, there are days when I wake up and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is a Peloton class right now, but I do it because of the feeling after. I know I'll have mental clarity. I know if I'm like anxious about something at work, that working out kind of helps me work that out of my system. And so that's a little bit like these kind of impossible tasks on our to-do list is if you know the feeling you'll get after you've done them. But doing a will is something you do only once, right? It's not like working out where you're doing it repeatedly every single week. And so how do we communicate to you, the listener who doesn't have a will? I promise you're going to feel like this because you don't know, right, until you've actually done it and you have that peace of mind yourself. So these are all the fun challenges of marketing wills to Canadians. And I always say, I'm like, you asked about kind of educating our kids about financial literacy. I always say at Willful, like, I'm not selling wills. I'm educating Canadians about the importance of this, about what's involved. yes, I believe Willful has an amazing product, but ultimately our goal is that everybody gets a will. If you choose to go to a lawyer, you choose to go to a notary, if you write it on a piece of paper, more power to you. I just care that you get it done. And I think that we have a great solution if you are conscious of cost and time. And especially as a parent, doing this in the middle of the night while you're breastfeeding, like it's, yeah, way easier than hauling your kids into a legal office. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, definitely. So just shifting focus, I'm thinking about like how your life is. You live in Prince Edward County, but you have this business and you're like busy running that. How do you navigate that like slower, more rural life that looks like very idyllic from when people know Prince Edward County? Like it's a beautiful area with like gorgeous beaches that do not look like Canada and wineries and amazing food. It seems so slow and people go there for holidays, but how do you balance that with being busy and being an entrepreneur? And do you need to be in Toronto and other places a lot, or do you just really work from home and that works out well?
Honestly, COVID was such a TSN turning point for us in terms of how we ended up out here. I have always been a city person, grew up in a smaller town, but when I graduated from university, moved to downtown Toronto and lived there for 14 years, and truly would say to my husband, I'll move to a bigger city like Paris or New York, but you'll never get me to a smaller place. And now we live in a village of 1,600 people. And the reality is during COVID, we had a place out here that we used as a family cottage and an Airbnb. And then we moved out here during COVID and honestly just never left. We fell in love with the pace of life. We fell in love with it, especially as young parents. There's so many young families out here. And we always lived in 600 square foot condos in the city. So it was a little bit of a reflection on, okay, in our 20s, that was amazing. And what we prioritized was proximity to bars and our friends, but now our values have changed, right? Now it's about space for our kids to run around and other families that are, in the same phase of life as us. And so let it we absolutely love living out here for those reasons, but also we have a lot of family nearby. My mom, my dad, Kev's parents, they all live in the area. And so we have a lot of help. When you asked earlier about, well, how do you do it? Well, my father-in-law picks our daughter up at kindergarten every day and tell daycare, our other daughter's done at daycare. Like we wouldn't be able to have the schedules that we do without that family help. And we wouldn't have that family help if we didn't live in this very rural area. In terms of running the business, I mean, listen, it's 2025. I think you can absolutely run an effective business regardless of what industry you're in a rural area and from home. Obviously, if you're manufacturing and you have a facility, that's different, but you can run a software business from home very easily. I am back in the city, I'd say once every 2 weeks, just for something, whether that's an event with one of our bank partners or something else. But it is, I actually love that because it's a nice chance to get in and experience the energy of the city. But yeah, I think it's very possible. And there's a really big movement right now towards back to work, right? Back to office, especially bigger corporations who are mandating 5 days a week. And it's interesting because so many folks that I've met in Prince Edward County, a lot of them moved out here because they had the ability to work remotely and maybe only go into the city once a week or once a month. And now that these back to office orders are coming in, you're seeing a lot of people contemplating, like, how am I going to change my career to suit my life out here, not how am I going to move back into the city. People have fallen in love with it, and now they're trying to find careers that are conducive to that. And at Willful, we've actually found it to be such a competitive edge in hiring that we're fully remote because there are very few employers who say, yeah, I don't care, live anywhere you want. We have an annual in-person retreat. As long as you show up to that, great. Otherwise, kind of live where you want. It's an anomaly actually now versus COVID where everybody was at home.
Yeah, there is a real shift happening with that. And I think a lot of people, like you say, are struggling. Even if they do live nearby, they've shaped their life around working from home. And that's a big challenge,
And
especially
especially
for
as a
parents.
parent, oh my goodness, I took 4 months of mat leave with both daughters. And then my husband took parental leave after that. I would not have been able to go back to work at 4 months if I had been commuting to an office and pumping in a bathroom stall and not seeing my child and I know that that's the reality for millions of women, especially in countries like the US who don't have mat leave policies like us. But I'm so grateful that that was my experience, that even though I went back to work a lot earlier than folks who might have a government job or a corporate job, I still got to see my baby every 2 hours, and I still got to breastfeed, and I didn't have that 2 hour commute to sit on a train waiting to get home to see my family for 5 minutes before bedtime. And it's a lot easier to be a parent who's also an entrepreneur when you can work from home. Absolutely.
Yeah, I find that myself. There's no time that you're wasting.
No, although I remember when I had a marketing agency in Toronto, I had a team member who commuted in from Whitby. So, 2 hours on the train every day. And I remember saying, like, this is so long. And she's like, no, no, I get to sit on a train for 2 hours and read my book, and my children don't bother me, and my husband doesn't ask me anything. It's my time. And that also reframed it. Some people want a commute. Some people like that time in their day. I don't. I absolutely love working from home, but find whatever works for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good to be clear on what you want and what works for your life, and
Yeah.
then try to shape everything around that. Was there anything that you wanted me to ask or anything that you wanted to talk about here that I didn't ask?
Oh my goodness. Good question. No, I mean, again, I feel like I'm a few years behind you in my parenting journey. So I feel like you are the one who has probably the most insights, especially in the work that you do in terms of how to organize, set a great example in work life balance. But no, nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think we're all learning and navigating, whether we've got 2 and 4 year olds or we have like 25-year-old kids, right? I'm sure we're learning every day.
That is the truth. But no, thanks for having me on to talk about all this stuff. I usually talk a lot about estate planning, talk a lot about the business side of it, but it's nice to actually talk about the parenting side and how it all works behind the scenes, especially because, to your point, I think the image that we all project on social media is one of calm and organization, and then our feet are just kind of, like that duck meme of racing below the water. So yeah, thanks for making space for us to talk about this.
Well, thank you for being on and educating us, and you're motivating me. I'm one of those people who do not have a will. I can't believe I'm admitting that, but I will get to it now after this conversation because I know what it will feel like after I do it. It'll be very liberating and freeing and just exciting to like have that item ticked off. So thank you for that motivation.
Of
Can you let
course.
us know where we can find out more about you and the work that you do? I will put everything in the show notes, but just in case listeners don't look at those, can you just let us know here?
Absolutely. So if you do need a will, you can go to willful, willful.co. And then you can find my columns every second Monday in the Globe and Mail in their personal finance section. And I'm at Erin Bury on all social platforms.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hillary. Appreciate it.